Welcome to another episode of the Dentology Podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. So welcome to this special edition of Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. And today it's Chris and myself just talking about our 2022 outlook. So these are the things that we are seeing in the press, seeing in the market, the profession, our own observations on how 2021 wrapped up. I'll just give people insights from our perspective as to what 2022 looks like.
Yeah, nothing like having a special edition, is that? It's like that extra when you buy something. You get it instead of 12, so here's 13.
Little bonus.
So this is a little bonus slot, really.
So, to wrap up the end of last year, 2021 finished very positively. The market was in a good place. We were busy. So obviously from a valuation and sales point of view, the demand for dental practices continued to be exceptionally high. Which was the case before COVID, but increased through COVID. Definitely. I think there was probably more inquiry from practice owners wanting to know what the market looked like, starting to get a bit more inquisitive about, a goodwill value is going to hold up. Is 2022 a good year to sell?
Yeah, I think 21 was... For dentistry was really positive, after 2020, which was sort of a year we've all forgotten, really. It's like that limbo year. And I did make me laugh when I watched the fireworks on New Year's Eve in 21, and I felt it summed up the year 2021 for non-dentists, which was sort of like it seemed to be unfocused, a little bit disinterested and not really very good, and a little bit spread out, which sort of struck me as I felt that's probably the way the country felt and the economy felt for 21. But dentistry, it finished on a real strong moment with values, buyers, banks, everyone's positive about it. It's brilliant. I mean, what do you reckon 2022 holds?
I think it's going to continue to be good. And it's hard. I think the support to the profession, the valuers, the brokers, the banks, the solicitors, all that support network's really strong. I think the dentists as associates or practice owners have proved to be incredibly resilient, worked really hard, adapted and evolved their businesses, their workflows, they've digitized in certain areas. So I think they're in a good place. I think there's some external factors that are starting to hurt dentists in some areas. I think the increased requirement to deliver NHS dentistry is hurting practices because patients probably aren't attending practices as regularly as they were before. I think people are still quite cautious about going out. We're hearing lots of practices having cancelled appointments. I think recruitment issues are starting to bite in some areas.
Definitely recruitment,
where they're either struggling to find people, or they're having to pay more money than they did before to keep good people.
To retain people.
And okay, you could possibly argue in some cases that some nurses possibly were paid close to minimum wage, and there's an argument as to whether that they should be paid more than they were being paid. But the reality for a business owner is that an increase in wages, if you can't match that with an increase in prices, then that hits your net profit. And as we know from a valuation point of view, that affects the business, but it also impacts the profit that sits in the business for the owner too.
I think the interesting one on that is it's quite amazing, really. I've had a number of conversations with, paying your nurse a decent amount of money, has been a conversation. And it's quite interesting for those of you that are listening to, think about actually what you've got to do, because they got themselves, just by not really understanding or not appreciating that just because they increased their staff wages by 10%, they didn't have to put their prices up by 10%, because their staff costs are only a percentage of the total costs. So when you actually work through it and say, right, well, if you're going to pay an extra 10%, which is going to cost you another, I don't know, 10 grand or whatever the number is, if you want to stay in the same position, you've only got to generate another 10 grand in your revenue, which might only be a price rise of 1%. And it was quite interesting because they sort of almost got themselves in worrying about the fact of flip. If I've got to pay someone more, if I've got to put my prices up more. And the answer is possibly, but not as much as you've got to put your salaries up.
Yeah.
And I think once I'd spoken to them, they were like, oh, okay, well, that's not too bad. And the reality of it is, isn't it? We've heard stories. Is it Sainsbury's now that's a minimum wage is £10 an hour?
£10 an hour.
So when you look at the responsibility of a dental nurse, especially, and probably the hassle they get and the training they've had to do and all that sort of stuff.
But also, I think aside from the NHS, particularly in private practice, we've seen lots of practices see serious growth in their private fees. And the expectation from patients in private dentistry is it's more experience-led. And to create a wow experience, you need good quality, well-trained people.
Definitely.
And if that means you have to pay a bit more, then I guess that's kind of part of the deal. But on the private fee side of things, because there has been a decent growth for most practices in private fees, even without putting fees up, they would have seen an increase in their income over that period as well. I think the challenge through 22 is to make sure those practices sustain those levels of income and don't fall into a trap that they assume that's their new level of performance.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas actually what it might have been is it might have been a spike during 2021, and making sure that they're able to back that up and that continues to work, particularly with an increased surgery time for the delivery of NHS dentistry, if you've got an NHS contract.
I think one of the concerns that I sort of see as a potential challenge or issue is the fact of, at the moment, it's yet again, it keeps coming up, doesn't it? But yet again, it's quite topical about the fact of patients can't see NHS dentists. You've got to wait 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is for an appointment. And patients are unhappy. And, I saw something on TV, I paid my national insurance number. I've had to fix my teeth with super glue. And this is a lady, I filed them down. I mean, flipping heck. And she was going on about this and it's just not right and stuff like that. And my hope is that the whole pattern of NHS provisioning will sort of get it right. But also I think that the biggest fear is what you don't want is that at the moment it seems to be that the patients are unhappy that they can't have NHS dentistry, but not unhappy with the dentist. They seem to be unhappy with the NHS stroke government. And what you don't want is for that to turn into and almost a dislike and aggression, maybe is the wrong word, towards dentists, because that's not going to be good for dentists at all, because they've sort of been elevated.
Oh, yeah. And in many ways, that's kind of the spilling over of the dental profession's frustration of the NHS funding system over to patients. It's starting to now hit them at their end. And I think everybody involved in dentistry would love to see a better system for funding NHS dentistry, a more manageable system, something that rewards them for the good work they do, a system that just works. Because at the moment, we're in this kind of no man's land where it's not one thing nor the other. And many practices over the last couple of years have seen growth in private fees, and it probably won't be this year, but it may be the year after, to see whether some dentists just decide to no longer provide NHS dentistry and say, actually, we've seen a demand from our patients to deliver private dentistry. We've seen growth in fees. We've only got a limited capacity within our practice. We've got 2-3 surgeries. We can't accommodate that NHS contract any longer, and they won't continue to deliver it. And from a government point of view, I know you've got these urgent hubs, but we could end up seeing fewer but larger NHS practices and a shift towards private dentistry.
Yeah, I think I can't remember, I was either this morning or yesterday, I was reading an article, I think it was on the BBC website, because this is a woman with the filed down teeth, and they were saying that, I can't remember, it might have been NHS England, or anyway, it's an article there, and they were saying that they'd had 1,000 dentists leave the NHS list. Now, I know that's performers, or so it's more than the number of dental practices, but I wonder how many, as a percentage, that is of people who've said, actually, I don't want to do this. I mean, you think upstairs we must get a call at least every day, couple of days, saying, look, I think I want to give back my contract. You know, they're not super big contracts, but I think they're still, you know, I think the biggest one we have is still a £200,000 contract.
I think anything where you hear people leaving the profession is bad news.
Yes.
You know, there's a need for dentists in this country. There's a need for more people delivering than we've got. So whenever you hear a number, whether it's nurses leaving the profession, you know, performers no longer deliver on the NHS, whatever it might be, I think that's just generally not good news. But markets tend to kind of almost fix themselves, don't they? As one door opens, another door closes, type mentality. But I think for the year coming as well, I'm also interested to see what new innovations come as well, because I think virtual consultations got a massive leg up through 2020 and 2021. And I think they've settled into a number of practices in terms of their mainstream working style. But I think we're probably on the cusp of seeing AI coming in.
And I think that's and one of the things for that, though, isn't it? You've got to have a dentist with the right attitudes.
Yeah.
Because the technology's there. It's been proven and robust enough. We've seen it, you know, and especially from, you know, when practices were locked down. And it'll be whether, you know, is it going to be one of these ones where you've sort of got to do it rather than, I want to do it. You know, is there a point whereby, a bit like scanners, really, I sort of believe that if you haven't got a scanner, then really probably you're going to lose out on business as it develops, if only because all your patients expect you to have a scanner. And if you're using gunk and goo, then the answer is they're going to almost think you might be a little bit low tech. Yeah. So I think it will be fascinating as to how that unravels this year and beyond, really.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think there's kind of trailblazing in 2021, but are people going to be playing catch up? But as a market and as a profession, I agree with what you said. It's in good shape. I think it's in good shape. I think there's lots to look forward through this year. It's going to be, you know, there's a bit of uncertainty on the NHS side until we get to the end of the contract year in April. What that will look like post-April, I guess maybe back to 100% delivery. I know there's concern amongst some contract holders about having the capacity to be able to deliver to that level. Given what's gone on, and there has to be patient demand, so that could have an effect. But it goes back to that, as a profession, they do have this uncanny knack to adapt and adjust, to make things work somehow or other. Yeah,
I mean, dentists are smart, aren't they? You know, I think I've been involved with dentistry since, before 1990. I know, amazing. And every time there's been a change in the payment mechanism, there is normally a bit of a hoo-ha over trying to understand how that mechanism works. And then dentists work it out because they either work better practices, they work different practices, they use their skill set because they're smart guys.
And I think ultimately, because they're responsible for their own business, okay, some of it might be centrally funded through government via the NHS, but they are responsible for their own business. They have to. They have to work it out. They're not in a position where, regardless of what happens, they're going to continue to be paid. And as a result of that, there is a guaranteed profit. It doesn't work like that. If you don't work this stuff out for yourself, there's a direct impact on you, your business, and your profitability. So you have to stay on your toes. You have to keep refining what you do, which I don't think from a commercial point of view is actually all bad news. It can just sometimes be a bit challenging.
And I think also genuinely, you know, of all the dentists that we've worked with, known of, 99.99999%, etc., really have the patient at the centre of what they want to do. You know, we all know there's a few people who...
It's a caring profession, isn't it?
But the vast majority of them actually want to deliver a good service. And I think sometimes that they're almost potentially their own worst enemy because they want to deliver good service, but don't necessarily want to make people pay for it. So they're then caught twixt and between because otherwise investments are coming from their own money, their own revenue. And it's a real interesting, because I think genuinely they just want the patients, you know, I can imagine they're not happy that these guys are in pain. You know, this woman filing her teeth and super gluing,
I'm sure.
putting her own teeth out. I can't imagine dentists for 1 minute or two just sitting there going, oh, well, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
They would probably be weeping in their whatever it might be.
No, absolutely.
Coffee or tea or whatever it might be. But I'd say 22, I think it's going to be fascinating, really. Hopefully the banks will continue supporting. There's no reason they wouldn't do.
No, not at all. Not at all. No. I think the support there's 14, 15 banks are actively supporting.
And coming in. I mean, David, wasn't he? David from FTA Finance was saying, I think there's been two new entrants in the last, which in itself is a real positive endorsement, isn't it? Because you wouldn't enter a rubbish market.
No.
Let's produce a product where it's not going to work and they're all going to go bankrupt.
Yeah, I think there's lots of really positive signs for the year ahead. So look forward to it.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be fascinating, and it'll be nice to have. You know, when did we say this? We said this in 2021, didn't it? But it would be nice to almost get back to normality.
Yeah, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, let's have normality. Would be good.
Well, that was a little special episode from Chris and myself, just talking about our views and thoughts and predictions for 2022. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you enjoy the Dentology podcast, feel free to subscribe.
And make suggestions.
Yeah,
if there's something you'd like us to talk about or a guest that you'd like us to get, then please let us know.
Yeah.
We'll try and find one, because we do this for, obviously we enjoy doing it, but we do it for you guys. So,
absolutely.
We think of guests, we think of what we think might be interesting, but it might be that someone wants to talk about making a cake or something.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.